Hey guys, this is a segment from the Slumpbuster podcast. You can find the full episode on any of the various podcast platforms, or of course, subscribe to us on YouTube for more of our content. Other than that, guys, sit down, bust a slump, and enjoy.
What's up, guys? It is playoff time. If you have a bye, congratulations. If you have to play this week, congratulations. You made it to the playoffs, but you still need to pick up players. You still got to better your team. This is the waiver ads for the Slumpbuster team this week. We got Juju. We got Drew. What's up, guys?
Nothing much. It's time for some playoff football. Hopefully you guys are in it. Let's bust that slump together.
Let's get it.
Let's do it.
All right, so we're going to start off with the most important position. We are going into the quarterbacks. So I have a guy for you. You're not going to play him right away. He's going to be a 2 QB league, maybe a starter in 1 QB leagues next week, not this coming week. It's Jalen Hurts. We don't know if he's getting the starting position, but why pull your starter that you owe $7 billion to in Philly if you're not going to make that change fully? But Jalen Hurts this week gets New Orleans, next week it's Arizona, and then Dallas, 3% owned, dual threat quarterback. But definitely, guys, Jalen Hurts is going to be a guy to keep your eye on. Make sure you pay attention to the news coming out of practice, who's getting first team reps, who's going to be starting, whatnot. So Jalen Hurts, 3% owned. You got to swoop him up now.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you about someone this week that's worth putting your eye on. You want to talk about revenge game narratives? I'm talking about Andy Dalton against the Bengals. Yes, the longtime Cincinnati Bengals starter, Andy Dalton, playing in a Dallas Cowboys uniform against those Bengals. He's only 13% owned. We know Cincinnati's not a great defense. I think this is perfect time for Andy Dalton to step up, be a perfect Week 14 sleeper if you're trying to get through to your next round in the playoff push. Drew, closes out on QBs.
Listen, guys, we're going to go with Matt Stafford here. He's been playing very, very well. And the worst part is he's barely owned in half the leagues. So that's saying something. A guy who just threw for 400 yards and a few touchdowns is under-owned in fantasy football. Listen, I've tried trading for this guy early in this season. He's a guy that you can look for on the waivers, and he could possibly be there. And so, looking at this, yeah, they're not winning much games, but it doesn't matter about him winning games. It's about stats in fantasy football, not about winning games. So, his stats have been off the charts. He's throwing for 300 yards, 350. Couple games he's thrown for 400, but this is a Matt Stafford that we've all picked up in fantasy for years. A guy who's like, oh yeah, a guy you can easily just throw for 300 yards like it's nothing.
Definitely look for those three guys, but let's change gears to the running backs. And I'm going to tell you a guy that's going to kill it for you this coming week. Not one down the road, it's this week. J.D. McKissic, Washington football team. They lost their number one running back in Antonio Gibson. J.D. McKissic is owned in 40% of the league. He gets San Francisco, Seattle, and Carolina the next coming weeks for your fantasy playoffs. And he has been peppered with targets. 10 targets for 70 yards this week. You might even get a little bit more on the running game with Antonio Gibson gone as that change of pace back to Peyton Barber. So definitely look him up. 40% owned. He's going to kill it for you guys, especially in PPR leagues.
All right, guys. Well, the next one up on our waiver wire ads is going to be Ty Johnson. So Ty Johnson, not the biggest name in the world. Obviously, he's only about 2% owned in most leagues. So deep sleeper we're talking about here. But against Seattle next week, Seattle, not necessarily the best defense, although they have been playing better. I think this is a guy that might be able to step up in Frank Gore's offense. And the bright side, at least he ran multiple routes for the New York Jets. So you can count on him as someone who won't get ridden out by game script, even if the Jets are trailing by 30, as they are wont to do.
So up next, we have Cam Akers, a young rookie. These last few games, going towards the end of the season, he's starting to come out of his shell. He's starting to ball out. Last game against the 49ers, he had 9 carries for 84 yards and a touchdown. And his schedule is looking pretty solid coming up for fantasy reasons. He's got the Patriots this week. It's going to be a little bit difficult, but he should be just fine. Then he's got the Jets, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. So he's got some very, very easy defenses coming up to where he can really perform and get you some serious amount of points.
Now we'll go from the ground to the air for the receivers this week. We've got 3 guys for you again, all under-owned in every league, and some of these guys are just criminal if you don't have them owned in any of your leagues. First up is going to be Tim Patrick for the Broncos, 21% owned. Guys, 4 of the last 5 weeks he's been in double-digit fantasy points. The 1 week, guess what? He didn't have a quarterback because of coronavirus. Guys, you can't fault him for only having a quarterback that throws for 1 completion for 12 yards. He has been a solid number 2 behind Jerry Jeudy, even surpassing Jeudy in multiple games. So you have to pick this guy up.
Speaking of guys that need to be picked up, Keke Coutee. Been waiting on it for a couple years. Could finally say Keke Coutee more often, and hopefully you can say he's in your fantasy starting lineup moving forward, because as the Houston Texans try and figure out this void right now and the lack of Will Fuller and Randall Cobb, Keke Coutee stepped up. Brandon Cooks is still the firm number 1 on that depth chart, but I think Keke Coutee is a solid person you could put out of the flex. And even though he has some not ideal matchups coming up in the next 2 weeks, I think that he still has enough target volume to be considered fantasy relevant. So Keke Coutee, someone to add to your waiver wire and say Keke Coutee a little bit more often.
Well, I got my man Cole Beasley. Listen, in only 2 games this season, he's only been under 10 points twice this season. Other than that, he's a double-digit man, and I think he gets shadowed because of Stephon Diggs and guys like John Brown. And a lot of people don't really rate. He's only 40% rostered right now. He's a guy who can jump onto the waivers, pick him up, and for the age of 31, he is playing very, very well. He just played a very good game tonight against the San Francisco 49ers and dropped 30 points. So he's a guy who's going to be there on the waivers, 40% owned, double-digit points almost guaranteed.
And if you need another reason to pick him up, he's got that sauce. He owns his own sauce business. He's got that sauce. He was also rocked like a baby today. Any guy that can get rocked like a baby, you have to pick up.
Absolutely.
So let's switch to probably the hardest position to predict, because tight ends, it's so random, just because it's a dart throw most weeks. Like, when has a tight end gotten 200 yards? It's only happened like one other time, and that was in the 90s, guys. This is such a difficult position, but we got 2 for you. First up is Logan Thomas. So San Francisco next week, Seattle the following week, Carolina the championship week. 40% owned. He led the Washington football team in targets and yardage this week. He also is a former quarterback. So guess what? If something happens and they need to go emergency quarterback coronavirus, you might be able to get a quarterback position at the tight end again this year. We don't know. We have no idea what's going to happen the rest of the year. It's crazy. Pandemonium. It's 2020, but you got to pick this guy up.
Yeah, absolutely. My tight end is Dalton Schultz. Listen, he has a decent floor. He's a tight end too. He's barely 20% owned right now, and he came off a pretty solid game against the Washington football team. Had a good game against Minnesota. He's a guy who's emerging after the fact that Dak Prescott got injured. Andy Dalton's using him a lot more recently, especially too when games against like big pass rushes. He's dumping it off to him a lot, and he's been starting to get open downfield a little bit. So Dalton Schultz is a tight end too, and a guy who can really get you going a little bit now.
Close it out with the DST, right? Week 14, we need a solid streamer. I'm going to go with the New England Patriots. Less than 50% owned for a top 7 defense, and they're going against Jared Goff and the Rams. We saw that Super Bowl a couple years ago. Everyone saw that miserable Super Bowl. Well, we get to see it again this week. And I think that the Rams are going to have a lot of pressure put on them by the hoodie as they get to stay a second week in Los Angeles.
That'll be it for us, guys. And like always, the playoffs is super important, so you need to be staying on those waiver wires. You also need to be staying on the news. Look for beat writers. Make sure you're doing all your research, because this is the time where you should not drop the ball. Do not be that guy that I had in my league a couple years ago that made it to the playoffs, forgot about fantasy football, and totally crapped the bed the first week of the playoffs. Don't be that guy. Nobody likes that guy. So let's bust this slump. Let's win you that championship, get you that trophy, that prize money, the belt, whatever you're playing for. Let's get it, guys.